Okay, let's get serious now. We're painting Ghost Bear, Theta Galaxy, these pretty cool like blue flames going up the side and the arms. So we're going to be doing two different sponge colors. Let's dive into this. Let's go. I'm officially using AK dark blue gray and gray blue. Now, before you start sponging, put this thing inside of a big thing of water, squeeze it out, and then just check after you're done. Just make sure when you rub it on your hand or arm, you just get a little bit off on you. So first, I'm going to use this dark blue gray and the gray blue and just start basing. Now I'm basing the chest in this color, the right leg, and the left arm. Wait, I reversed those. The left leg and the right arm, I'm painting those in this color because the other colors have gray, dark gray. And I'm just going to go to my brush here just with a kind of a thinned out paint here just to cover up the rest, because sponging is good for base coating, but you typically miss. But hey, it's quick and efficient. I'm going to use London Gray, which is kind of a darker gray, on the left leg and the right arm, because these are dark gray and the other ones are more of a off-white according to the source material for this particular galaxy. And in typical fashion, doing two coats of this, knowing that I don't want to kind of blop up any kind of paints, so it can be nice and a clean, smooth finish. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this deep gray wash from Ammo. I'm mixing it with white spirits, and this is like a panel liner wash. I want to try this on the whites, and then I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the grays anyway, just so things are consistent. I have been putting these enamel washes later in the process, but I want to just see how it turns out using it at the beginning of the process. And just using the makeup sponge for an easy cleanup with white spirits. I want to go right back to that blue gray and the dark blue gray bases and just work on building up those previously gray blue colors and just kind of cover up a little bit of that gray of the enamel washes that were there. And I have to admit, I haven't read any on the lore of these guys. I've been so fixated on the Outworld Alliance. I've been planning on doing the Thermo Police, so bear with me. I don't know anything about these guys. I'm going to use now the gray blue and cover up roughly about 60% of the previous colors, because I do want to go pretty bright because it's going to end up to an off-white. So I'm just still trying to keep a little bit of that mix underneath, but I'm building up. Now, the next step, I'm covering about 40% this time, and this is with the off-white mixed with the AK gray blue, which is like Thunderhawk blue. I think so. My favorite. And I will note here that when you get to white, it can get grainy. And I'm learning to battle that by making sure the sponge I'm using is more damp. And that worked this time around. When I did that Comstar Atlas a month ago, it was decently grainy. So in this case, I made sure my brush or my sponge was more damp, and I was doing more lighter coverage on it. So this helped me tremendously so I would not get that dusty, grainy look. And I like the end result. You'll see it when it comes. And when you're doing brighter colors, do lighter dabs of the sponge because you have more control. I'm going to go ahead and jump into a little bit of edge highlighting. I'm using the model color off-white and just picking up some of those edges just so I don't have to overdo the white sponge because I am afraid of the grainy look. So I'm hitting edge highlights on some of the main edges of the white panels here because we still do have the gray on the left leg and on the right leg. And let's start working on those now. So I'm going to use that base of London gray, and I'm covering at least 60% of coverage here. This was the original color I used, so it's not as noticeable. Now I'm going to jump into using the medium gray by Model Color, and now I'm covering 40% of that, just slowly building up of that gradient going from darker to a brighter hue there. Hue, not a hue, a brighter color. And finally, the last sponge color is using Stonewall Gray, and I'm doing this the lightest, and this is at least maybe 10% of the panels, and I'm just hitting it on all the areas that would see sunlight. Yes, I guess so. The light source and just the top of the panels, because I'm going to use that going forward for edge highlights. Now, I wanted to mix off-white with it, and I want to hit just the top connecting panels just to kind of blend that transition from the white to the gray. The end result, I don't know if I see this too well, but the idea was that it would blend together. In the reference art, I don't necessarily see that, and I went even farther with the off-white, and granted, it worked, but I don't know if I would do this again, but I thought it would look cool if they are transitioning together. Next, I'm just going to use the Game Color Stonewall Gray and pick up some of the edge highlights. Now, I really wanted this model to be minimalistic, so I'm just doing minimal edge highlights, and this is the only edge highlight. So I want to work this on a lot of the edges, and as always, using the side of the brush just to have more control over the edges here. And CGL minis are kind of hard to find the edges, so you have to be sometimes creative, and I think in this case I used the side of the brush for every single edge highlights. Now let's start working on these crazy blue flames with Game Color Andrea Blue. Now I did flames before on that canned heat group, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just kind of creating these patterns of flames and just kind of being creative with it. At first I was kind of looking at reference art, and then I realized that's not going to work because I have a different model in front of me. So I decided just to have fun and to create kind of swirls and patterns of the blue. Now, when doing something like this, I don't want it to become clunky, so my paint is decently watered and thinned down. I was preparing to do 2 or 3 coats of this, and I think in the end I did 2 coats. So I'm just covering up, sadly, all that work I did on the whites there, but it's okay. I'm covering it up with joy because the blue flame's looking cool. And I wanted to create a little bit more depth here, so I just went back with some off-white, and I wanted to create kind of a different flame. The work here was a more interesting, and finally with that arm, the same technique with those blues. And something, again, if you're doing work like this, make sure the paint is thinned down, because if you make a mistake, it's easier to cover up thinned down paint than if you were to put thicker paint. And have fun with this kind of stuff. It's interesting, it's different, and it's not just typical numbers or lines, and this is unique. I want to do a little bit of highlighting on this, so I'm going to just use the Andrea Blue mixed with the off-white. And this is my only highlight for these, so I need to be quite skillful, I guess, to choose where they go. And this is fun, and it's, again, I'm using the side of the brush because it has a lot of control on these mechs when doing edge highlights. And have you guys tried flames on miniatures? I've seen them in different reference arts. Have you tried anything like this before? How many Theta Galaxy fans are out there? Now I'm just going to use the off-white and pick out just one more edge highlight on the whites, because, not the whites, the Andrea blue flames, because I want to push just a little bit here and just being very minimalistic on just the sharpest edges with this thing. And yet again, using the side of the brush because it's super easy here. Now, I wanted to go back with the sponge and just create a little bit of contrast. And this is cool with the sponge because even when you're doing things like flames or something, you can come back with a sponge and just kind of create a little bit of like visual interest. And that's what I did. Now the brush, the makeup sponge was decently damp, so I had a little bit more control. Now I'm gonna do this is not necessarily glazing, but I'm going back with an AK mix of those gray blues, and this is basically just kind of like a thin down layer. It's not a glaze, and I'm just picking out some of those details underneath the panels. And this isn't as detailed of a glaze, kind of like I was doing with that Comstar Night, but I'm just cleaning up just to create kind of shadows. So more simple, I guess you would say. And you could do purples here. You could do different colors. I think even like a bluish color would look cool underneath. But hey, I'm happy with this. It's looking pretty cool. Now I'm going to do just some edge highlights on the whites, and I'm going to use Nuclear White by Green Stuff World. I don't like this white anymore. It's failed me, so I'm going to pick up some new whites. I am probably going to pick up AK's paints, but we'll see. So I'm just picking out all those lines here on the whites and just being kind of my same style, very minimalistic, and picking out those most sharp edges. And I always like to do these kind of scratches on some of it, so I kind of blended here a little bit and I create a few scratches just to create a little bit of interest on those panels. Next, I'm going to work on the metals. I'm going to use that gunmetal by Model Color and just pick out all the metals. When I first started painting this summoner, I was like, hey, there's not that much metal. But then when you start finding them all over the place. And I think I was looking on camo specs online just to make sure I wasn't missing anything, because frankly, I'm kind of used to painting inner sphere mechs, and the clan mechs, the whole back is so much different with the heat sinks. So reference art is key here. It helps out a lot when trying to find out which things are metal and which things aren't. And I'm just going to use Nolan oil, and I'm literally almost out of this stuff. I need to find a new wash for this. And just doing the careful washing, because I don't wash the whole miniature. I'm consistently going back and forth to the pot, and don't let this stuff pool, because if it pools, when it dries, it comes this clunky, gooey stuff. So don't pull it in. I actually sometimes, when it pools on me, I actually go back and I use that pool to shade other parts of the metals. So that's usually what I do. Do you do that? Because it helps. To highlight those metals, I'm going to use Model Air Aluminum. This is a little bit more of a sharp highlight compared to what I've used in the past, and it stands out more. And when you're using such a sharp contrast to the dark metal to a bright one like this aluminum, you have to be kind of careful just to hit very small edges, because it shows your mistakes very quickly. If you create a wiggly swiggly line, it will show very easily. Now, to work on these missiles, I just use War Paint's Pure Red. Pick out the details carefully because it's very, if you got this on the gunmetal, that would be very annoying. And I just use the blood chalice and just pick out the smallest of details on this. And you could use orange to go even farther, but I'm happy where this one is. It looks good. All right, I'm going to use AK Rubber Black and start chipping away at this because I want this thing to look beat up. And I love this. I did do grays before and I didn't film it, but they're very minimal and the black stood out a lot more. And I think the double chipping is the best here because when you do double armor chipping, it becomes so interesting. It creates kind of this like cool transition of weathering. That happens. I'm using green stuffed world, fluorescent green, and just kind of glazing over the cockpit glass. And I decided to do more of my like fluorescent cockpit for this. And after I do that glaze of the fluorescent color, I just come back with the Warpaint's Rainforest and just do a little bit of a highlight on the front. Granted, this is not the typical jeweled method, but it comes off quite well, especially when contrasting to that white. Okay, here we go. Base is finished and varnished. I'm pretty excited. Now, I was going to paint this as a batch painting all together. That will be on a live video tomorrow. This video should be posted by then. And I like this, and I added some of the weather in the legs as well, just to create a little bit of dirt and visual interest on those legs. So I should do a video on that to show a little bit of the base and the end work. And here's a little bit what the people on the Discord are working on. These are really cool paint jobs. And I got one of these to paint. Hooray! Coming soon. Not next week, but maybe 2 weeks away. See you guys later. Have a great week.